Hello, loved ones. Welcome to the Whose Life Is It Anyway podcast. We made this for you who are now ready to help create a world that works for everyone. Enjoy.
Hello, everybody. We are talking to Karen Wilmot. She is the virtual midwife and founder of the Due Date Club. Thank you so much for wanting to participate in our summit.
Well, thank you very much for inviting me. It's a great privilege and honor to be here with you and to share this message of whose life is it anyway?
Yeah. So whose life is it? What do you think?
Well, I'm all for, I know this whole summit is about our sovereignty and our choices. And above everything else, I'm a midwife. And I know that during pregnancy, women are faced with many, many choices, and more now than they used to be sort of 20, 30, 40, 50 years ago. But I support women's choice. You know, I am a midwife that has come through the medical system. I was trained in the medical system and spent many years going against and dishonoring women's choice, as a young midwife and thinking that was my job, that I was doing the right thing. But, there's always something inside of you that thinks, hey, this just doesn't feel right and whatever. And as I got older and I learned more, I realized I have to step away from the system, unlearn everything that I knew and relearn it in a way that supported women and that supported choice. And that is what I do now. And that is how I work. I support women and I support choice. I'm glad I have that medical background because it certainly gives me a deeper insight into the way the system works. But it is getting more and more corrupt and more controlling. And it's very unfortunate, especially when it comes to pregnant women and birth.
Yeah, because I've tried it once, and second time I did a home birth, but the first time I was so full of fear because I had 3 or 4 midwives and none of them knew me at all. It was the first time meeting me. And they didn't know anything about what I wanted. And I didn't know anything about what I wanted because all I've heard about giving birth was it's going to hurt really bad. That was the only thing. And maybe you will, is it called burst?
Yeah, you come apart.
Yeah, come apart down there. And then they have to
Sew
together and stuff like that. So it was really scary for me.
Yeah, and that means that you probably went through your pregnancy with a lot of fear, and you went into labor with a lot of fear, and then being surrounded by 4 people that you'd never met before in one of the most vulnerable times in your life is not okay. And the system actually thinks it's okay.
Yeah,
like it's designed to put 2 strangers together at a vulnerable and intimate time, and make the person in charge of your decisions and choices.
Yeah.
And they will also not necessarily give you the information or even the options as to how to be an active participant in your bodily function and what you're doing.
Yeah.
So I can imagine that must have been incredibly scary for you and probably very traumatic. And I'm not surprised you went on to have a home birth.
Yeah.
I can imagine that there were completely different experiences.
Completely different.
And actually, but also for me, because for me, the first birth, I was there in the room in this clinical hospital setting, sat in a chair, and had nothing I could do, no influence whatsoever. And then at the end, she passed out and they carted her off, and I stood there with a newborn. It's like, okay, I have not been part of this, and suddenly now I'm holding my newborn and it looks like my wife is dying. So I'm going to be a single father from now on, and nobody involved me in the process whatsoever. The second time I was involved in the whole thing, and I'm a body worker, so I know a lot about breathing and fear and stress. And I was in the tub with Katrina, and the midwife was just on the sideline, and she would come in and take a pulse or listen to the heartbeat, and then she would just step back and she was there. Yeah, she would sip her tea, and she was there if there was something. But apart from that, it was our birth, like, of course, mainly Katrine, but I took part in it. I guided her. I helped as much as I could. And
It was just
it was
wonderful.
beautiful. It was
Yeah.
in a tub, in a gazebo, in Katrine's parents' home, overseeing their garden. It was just so tranquil. And
Yeah, and the other births at the hospital were just so traumatic and stressful, and everyone at the end were so happy because it was what do we call it? Lige efter bogen.
yeah, according to the book, like it was just according to the book, like
Yeah.
that. But it wasn't a good experience. It was a horrible
No, that does,
experience.
according to the book, doesn't mean it's good. Or,
No.
it's very often we hear, and very often I hear from women I meet, that they will be telling me a very traumatic birth story, but at the end, or even in between, in the middle of it, they will say, but it's okay because my baby's fine and I'm okay.
Yeah.
My baby's fine, so it doesn't matter. I know it was terrible, but she's so stuck in that trauma, but she's been conditioned to say that as long as the baby's healthy, that I can deal with anything and I just need to get over it.
Yes. But is that baby then fine?
Well, is the mom fine?
Yeah, the mom is definitely not fine, and then the baby will not be fine.
Exactly. They're a dyad, they're connected. So if mom is going through and having to process the traumatic birth experience, then absolutely the baby did as well.
And that is one thing too, like with the giving birth, like you're coming into this world, and the first thing that happens to you is trauma.
Imprint.
Yeah, it's traumatization. It's like you come out in an environment that's not conducive to this. You get jabbed in the heel, and you get your vitamin K shot, and all these, like, it's it's oh god, it's such an important word. But like it's stepping over your boundaries. Like you come into this world, and everything that happens right after that is people overstepping your boundaries and your
invasion.
Invasion, yes.
Yeah, it is. It's an invasion. And it's not taking into account, I think the word you used when you were describing your home birth was the energy and the connection that the two of you had, and the connection that your midwife had with you. But we don't need to be sitting on top of you or right in the room, because we're energetically connected. So now, with the learning that I have now, that I'm able to be energetically connected to a couple, and I don't need to be in the same room. Yes, I will come in and do all of those checks, but you're working with all 5 senses then, and I'm trusting the two of you. You want a safe and healthy outcome even more than what I do. I mean, I don't think it's possible, but that's the reality of it, isn't it? Yeah. So if something instinctively feels wrong, and you are deeply tuned into your intuition and your baby and what is happening, you will probably know before I do.
Right.
So that is the silent agreement that we have in a sacred birth like that, where I really trust both of you and your baby, and I'm energetically connected to all 3 of you, and we're working in this together. But I bring my medical knowledge and experience and everything, and I will use all the tools and experience and knowledge that I have. But the one I trust the most is by far my intuition and that connection that I feel, and my 5 senses.
So how do we take a woman, a first time mother who hasn't gone through all this, and she's been so conditioned from day one on this earth that this is all the expertise is outside of her. You have to look up and trust and follow the authorities, and it's okay to have my boundaries completely stepped upon from I'm coming into this world. How do we help her to go into I can trust my own intuition, guidance, senses? A million women before me have done this in my ancestry, and like come into herself and start to trust herself, and finding someone like you to be there as a support, instead of coming into a hospital or wherever you want to go, where somebody else overtakes the birthing experience.
Unfortunately, it's an inside job. I definitely, certainly what I do in the Due Date Club is share the information, and I bring in all aspects of birthing and pregnancy and support But what I'm doing and what I'm offering is the internal changes and tuning into the internal wisdom and the inner guidance and your inner knowing, our connection. But if that's not there, then it doesn't matter how much information I share or how much reassurance I give. And I think we've seen it now, if fear overrides your inner knowing, then you're going to go on the path of fear. And the path of fear generally is to trust the external more than the internal.
And it's painful.
Yes, but it's an inside job. So, I can't make that change. I can't put my hand in the head and say, this is it. That has to come either from knowledge. And I think there's always a little seed. It's just like, for me, there was a seed inside that took years to sprout and grow through witnessing so many traumatic birth experience, being part of so many traumatic birth experience, and every time thinking, this is not right. This is what I've been taught. This is what I thought was right. I think I'm doing the right thing, but something is wrong about it. And, the first time it happens, it's just a thought. But then after many, it becomes, eventually you can't ignore it anymore. And then it's wrong because you've seen it too many times.
Yeah.
How many midwives end up following the same path as you? Like how many does it become an awakening process to seeing the wrongness? Or is it with everything else very small, or is it actually a larger portion of humanity?
It's definitely growing. I mean, there's something called the Association of Radical Midwives, ARM. Yes. And there are pockets of us around the world. And it's funny, actually, because my journey began when I was working in the Middle East, where it was quite difficult for me because I was very isolated there. I certainly didn't have any other midwives who felt the same around me geographically. So I was reaching out to these radical midwives around the world. And once I knew that they existed, I thought, okay, I know I'm just part of a bigger movement. And that's always been my belief, is that we are all around the world and we're all connected and we're all just doing our thing wherever we are in our own way to make the change that we know is possible. But we're definitely in the minority. There's no doubt about that. We are in the minority and we are seen as radical. And, we talk about the witches being burned at the stake. Many of those witches who were burned at the stake were midwives, because midwives are wise women.
Yeah.
And that witch hunt continues. It definitely continues.
Yeah.
Because when we work the way we do, we also believe in life and death. So there are times when things don't go as planned and babies do die. And of course, that is, as I say, nobody wants a good outcome more than the parents and the midwife. There's nothing worse than being at a birth where we lose a baby, or a mother for that matter. But it does happen. And so, there are stories of midwives where that has happened and they have been crucified and put under house arrest. I mean, I don't know if you've heard of Agnes Gareb. I mean, she was under house, I think she's still under house arrest for that.
Really?
Yes. But babies die in hospitals all the time.
Yeah.
And very often at the hands of doctors and at the hands of irresponsible humans, or things that are done to prevent something but would ultimately cause something. But because it happens in hospital, it's okay. Yeah. And sometimes we don't lose the baby, but we will cause permanent damage, or we will do something else. But because it happened in hospital, it's okay.
Yeah, it's really
doesn't make sense. The amount of babies who are lost at home births are way less than hospital.
Yeah, we've been a part of several groups on social media with other parents to children with handicapped or special needs, and lots of them are handicapped because of a mistake that the doctor did during birth. And they're still mad about it, of course. And yeah, the doctor cannot do anything besides saying I'm sorry, or I needed to do it, or I don't know.
Yeah. But
It's really
it's
sad.
where you're talking about midwives being crucified for being wise women, and it's like the same kind of institutionalization. Instead of the Catholic Church, now it's just the hospitals, and the doctors are the high priests, you know. So
Yes, and you know, to go back to your point about children with special needs and cerebral palsy and birth injuries per se, you know, across the board. And the one that is most common is cerebral palsy. But it's really important to note that the rates of cerebral palsy has stayed the same despite the rising cesarean section rate.
oh, okay.
It hasn't changed, you know, and that's what obstetricians and high interventionist doctors will use as their argument. They say, well, they are doing everything that they possibly can to prevent birth injury and specifically cerebral palsy. But the statistics don't match up with that. Because if that was the case, then our cesarean section rate, which is currently, I mean, it differs from country to country, but in South Africa, we're around about 70%.
No way.
70%. Yes.
What?
So we're the second highest in the world. Brazil is the highest. And
Okay.
That is absolutely insane.
but the
But
birth
that's
injuries stay the same.
yeah, but that's probably a like a timing issue. The factory preset, you know, like we have to get them out in this many hours, and if we don't have them by then, we're gonna cut. Or
No, a lot of it is coercion that happens during pregnancy. So just, you know, working on the fear of a first-time mom specifically. And, you know, that just very subtly saying a cesarean section is a safer option. Your baby is quite big, or you're quite small, or so that would be one of them. That starts very early on in pregnancy, or in the beginning, you know, we call it bait and switch. And I'm assuming the people who are going to be watching this are all kind of on the same wavelength. So I'm speaking quite freely here. But, you know, there's very much a culture of bait and switch where the doctor will, throughout, you know, mom will arrive saying, I really want a natural birth and this is what I want. Yes, absolutely. That's definitely better. So they get that trust relay. Yes, we do believe in natural birth, but around about 28 weeks, then they start saying, oh, but the baby's quite big and this. So there's those little seeds of doubt that are planted and watered at every single appointment until it gets to the point of around about 38 weeks where they can actually find something now. The seeds of doubt are there, they've been watered, and then it'll be, oh, I can see the baby's cord is around the neck, which is not a reason for cesarean section, but it's a scary thing if it's your first baby and you go online and you read up what happens if the baby's cord is around the neck. So, you know, they will say, so you have got the option to do a cesarean, and, you know, I have a slot open tomorrow, so you could come in. And, you know, when you're 38, 39 weeks pregnant, you've had enough. It's very easy to say, oh, okay. Especially if I think that it stays in any longer, there's a possibility my baby is going to strangle itself, which I know that is not going to happen, but that's the thought. That's what you might find if you go online, if you haven't done enough research and you don't have a second opinion or another answer. So that is one of them. Another one will be around, you know, just inducing because you've got to 40 weeks and you haven't gone into labor spontaneously. Another one happens around, you know, major holidays, Christmas, New Year, when they're going away. Then they've got the women themselves have got such a relationship with this doctor that doesn't really care about them, but they think is going to save their life. And if the doctor says, well, I'm not going to be here when your due date arrives, but I can do a cesarean section, then they think that's better than having someone they don't know, because they're putting it externally. They think that the person who's there is going to make a big difference to the way they experience the birth process. So it's also a misunderstanding of what actually happens. So you're the only one who can give birth. You're the only one who can have that baby. And you know, it doesn't matter who's in the room. Well, it does, but the people will influence the outcome and the way you feel about it.
And I want to say something, because I heard some years ago that it only takes 3 generations of women who doesn't give like a normal natural birth for it to like disappear. So the 4th generation won't be able to do it or have forgotten how to do it. So it's not like downloaded in your genes. Have you heard that?
Not in those words, but there's definitely an element of truth in that. And one, because the more first-time moms are given cesareans, the more likely it is that the second baby will be born by cesarean, not because it has to be done, but because if they go to the same doctor who convinced them first time around that a cesarean was better, then he's going to be even more resistant to her having a natural birth second time around, because now there is actually a risk factor. It's not huge, it really isn't big, but it's enough to convince them, because now she is what we call a vaginal birth after cesarean, which there's an added risk. Like I said, it's not huge. So the chances of her having another one are more likely. And so in South Africa, what we're doing is we are creating a nation of cesarean section moms, because it is a knock-on effect. And then in terms of like 4 generations, that's definitely possible, because that's the imprint we are coming in with.
But you are talking about, like, by far the most women are physically able to
Without a
give the
doubt.
natural. Yeah.
Without a doubt. But it's very easy to convince you that you're not.
Yes.
And I think it comes back to you. That's why I say it's an inside job. It's about, sharing the information in a way that doesn't make the woman afraid of everything. It's really sharing what we are capable of, what nature has already provided.
What do you provide in the due date club?
Community over, above, and everything else. So it is a community platform, and it does provide all the information that they would get from their favorite app. So like every pregnant woman has an app that every week it tells them how big their baby. So yes, it includes all of that, but it's community, and then all the courses and a lot of live interactions. So I'm available in there, coming in every single week and chatting about that. So when they have a question, I came back from the doctor today and he said this, I can counter it. So I had that today. I have a woman who's 36, almost 37 weeks pregnant. She's in Switzerland. And she sent me a message after her appointment saying that the doctor had done an internal examination and the cervix was still very posterior and not dilated. So immediately I'm like mad as anything, because she shouldn't have had the internal examination at 36 weeks. She's still pregnant. What's the point?
Yeah.
The second thing is she's worried now because she's been told her cervix is pointing towards the back and closed, which is exactly what it's meant to be doing. That's exactly what it's meant to be doing. I mean, that is nature's way of making sure that she doesn't go into premature labor. In the last couple of weeks of pregnancy, the cervix gradually moves more central so that the head can start pushing down and getting ready for birth. It's not meant to be there yet. She's only 37 weeks. And then the third thing she said to me was, now I'm having like lots of Braxton Hicks, which are like those practice contractions, which once again, it's not a bad thing, but because those are good, but they are in response to the internal examination, which was an invasion.
Yeah.
So, then I had an opportunity to share with everybody in the community that everything that happened, obviously now I'm speaking, like I'm mad. I don't go on and tell them how mad I am. I just remind them how perfect their body is, that it's doing everything that it should be doing. And that's absolutely great. And use it as an example to question when you're offered something, because that's really important. So, if you, whether she or not she was asked her consent for that examination or not, I'm not sure. But the fact is, it's going to happen. Why are you doing it? Is it absolutely necessary? What information will you get from this? And what will you do with that information? Those are 4 very simple questions to ask. But if they can't answer, if they're not, I mean, they didn't do anything with that information, did they? So what was the point of doing it?
Yeah.
But again, that's the invasion and overstepping of boundaries that we see everywhere, in schools, and like we have given away our own authority to these figures, and then they overstep our boundaries because we don't know any better, because we from day one we get traumatized, and then
we get separated from each other, and we don't share our thoughts and feelings and beliefs that much. So we walk around and thinking that maybe I'm wrong.
Yeah, I'm alone.
I'm alone with this thought
wrong.
and this feeling.
Yeah.
Hey, thanks for watching. If you liked what you just saw, head on over to whoselifeisitsummit.com/podcast, where you can find full-length episodes as well as in audio format, and we do a lot of other cool stuff. You can hang out with us and other like-minded individuals who want to create a world that works for everyone, and we do that on our platform where we can chat, and we have Q&As and exclusive interviews as well. So there's so much to get over there. So come on over and play with us.